September 15th, 2017. A pale blue dot in the distance receives one final whisper from the edge of Saturn. For 20 years, the Cassini spacecraft had circled the gas giant, diving through its rings, photographing its moons, and sending back a story that would change how humanity sees the outer solar system forever. But on that morning, hundreds of millions of kilometers away, a faint carrier wave appeared on NASA's Deep Space Network monitors, and then, after a few seconds, it vanished. Silence. Cassini was gone. Its final act was a controlled fall into the atmosphere of Saturn, a world so massive that nothing could survive its descent. The mission ended not with an explosion, but with the quiet disappearance of a signal, a heartbeat lost in the static of the cosmos. Yet, what Cassini sent back before that final plunge would haunt scientists for years, because among its images there were things no one expected. Shadows in the rings that moved as if alive, electric storms larger than Earth that rolled for months in the upper atmosphere, strange hexagonal clouds swirling around the North Pole like the geometry of some alien machine. And then there were the moons, Enceladus, Titan, Iapetus, each hiding secrets that redefined what a lifeless world could mean. Cassini was not just a probe, it was a witness. It saw a realm of ice and fire, a miniature solar system orbiting a world of storms, and it recorded it all in silence, frame by frame, until the end. We like to think space is empty, but Cassini showed us that even in the coldest corners of the solar system, something moves, breathes, and evolves. The truth is not just what Cassini found, but what it revealed about us. That curiosity will drive us to send our fragile creations into the void, just to catch one last glimpse before the darkness swallows them whole. To understand what Cassini truly saw out there, what its real images revealed, we must go back to where it all began. Earth, decades before the fall, when humanity decided to send a messenger to Saturn. In the late 20th century, before smartphones, before the internet truly linked the world, a different kind of connection was being built, one that would stretch not across nations, but across the solar system. It began as an audacious idea, to send a robotic emissary to Saturn, the most mysterious of the outer planets. At the time, only the Pioneer and Voyager probes had dared to pass through its domain, capturing fleeting glimpses of its rings and moons. But those missions had been brief, flybys measured in hours. What scientists wanted now was a long-term resident, a spacecraft that would orbit Saturn for years, studying its every storm, its magnetic field, and the secrets of its frozen satellites. Out of this dream came Cassini-Huygens, a collaboration between NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Italian Space Agency. It would be the most complex interplanetary mission ever launched. 22 instruments, 6.5 tons of machinery, a high-gain antenna the size of a satellite dish, and a nuclear heart beating with plutonium power. Built not just by engineers, but by generations of dreamers who understood that some frontiers could only be crossed once. Cassini was launched on October 15, 1997, atop a Titan IV rocket. It would take nearly 7 years to reach Saturn, slingshotting around Venus twice, Earth once, and Jupiter once, to gain the momentum it needed. Every maneuver was a dance with gravity, each planetary flyby bending its path like a cosmic ricochet. For the team back on Earth, every success was measured in heartbeats and telemetry data. They could not see the spacecraft, they could only listen. Across the void, light itself took more than an hour to make the journey. Cassini had become a distant echo of human will. While the spacecraft traveled silently through the outer solar system, back on Earth, time marched on. The world changed. Technology advanced. Entire generations were born who would grow up never knowing a sky without Cassini circling Saturn. The mission had become a bridge between eras, the last great analog dream of the 20th century, carrying humanity into the digital age of exploration. On July 1, 2004, Cassini arrived. After 7 years in flight, it fired its main engine for 96 minutes and was captured by Saturn's gravity. Humanity had entered orbit around another planet for the first time since Mars. The images that followed stunned the world. A world of liquid clouds, massive hurricanes, and rings brighter than any telescope had ever shown. Cassini's cameras began to map those rings in exquisite detail, structures tens of thousands of kilometers wide, yet thinner than paper. The spacecraft had reached its destination, but for the men and women who had built it, this was just the beginning. Months later, the European-built Huygens probe separated from Cassini and plunged into the thick orange haze of Titan. On January 14, 2005, it descended for 2.5 hours, sending back the first and only images from the surface of a moon beyond Earth. What it saw was shocking. River channels, lake beds, and rounded pebbles carved by flowing liquid. Not water, but methane and ethane, hydrocarbons raining from Titan's sky. For the first time, humanity had proof that another world could mimic the processes of Earth. Erosion, rain, shorelines, all sculpted in alien chemistry. Back in orbit, Cassini continued its grand survey. It mapped Saturn's magnetic field, probed its atmosphere, and took over 400,000 photographs. It became not just a spacecraft, but an artist. Each image, a swirl of clouds, a moon emerging from shadow, a storm bigger than continents, was a message across time, proof that a machine built by human hands could look upon another world with clarity and grace. For 13 years, Cassini kept watch, circling the giant more than 200 times. It became the eyes of an entire species, gazing at a planet once thought unreachable. But what it was about to discover would rewrite what we thought we knew about life, order, and chaos in our solar system. When Cassini finally slipped into orbit around Saturn, it crossed into a world that no one had ever truly seen before. For centuries, Saturn had been a distant ornament in the night sky, a pale yellow sphere with mysterious rings glimpsed only through telescopes. But through Cassini's cameras, that distant beauty transformed into something real, textured, and alive. The first images returned were breathtaking. A massive planet swirling with storm bands, lightning flashing deep within its clouds, and rings so sharp and structured that they looked like the grooves of a colossal record turning in space. Saturn was not calm. It was dynamic, full of movement, full of secrets. Cassini began its long ballet among the moons and rings, tracing orbits that brought it closer to the gas giant than any mission before. Its instruments recorded Saturn's magnetosphere singing with radio waves, a ghostly chorus produced by charged particles spiraling through its magnetic field. Its spectrometers detected chemicals in the upper atmosphere: hydrogen, helium, traces of ammonia, methane, swirling in endless patterns under bands of cloud thousands of kilometers thick. Every photograph revealed new mysteries: polar storms that rotated for years, hexagonal jet streams that defied explanation, and layers of clouds reflecting sunlight in subtle shades of gold, tan, and gray. Saturn's famous rings, once thought to be solid disks, turned out to be vast fields of ice and dust, billions of particles, each orbiting in its own delicate path. Some were the size of sand grains, others as large as houses, colliding and shattering and reforming over time. Cassini's close passes showed structures within the rings that no telescope on Earth could ever resolve. Narrow gaps, braided patterns, and faint ripples caused by the gravitational tugs of Saturn's moons. These rings were alive with motion, waves and wakes created by invisible shepherd moons, their gravity sculpting the edges like unseen artists. As Cassini moved deeper, it revealed a spectacle that defied imagination. During the Saturnian seasons, when sunlight struck the rings at low angles, shadows stretched for thousands of kilometers, casting dark, razor-thin lines across the planet's surface. Occasionally, those shadows shifted in ways that puzzled scientists, as if something massive, unseen, were moving within them. In one sequence, Cassini photographed narrow propeller shapes, disturbances in the rings created by moonlets too small to see directly. These tiny worlds, just a few hundred meters wide, orbited like hidden wanderers, tracing paths that changed the flow of ring material around them. It was the first direct evidence of how planets themselves might have once formed, sculpted from cosmic dust in the early solar system. And then there was the atmosphere, an ever-changing symphony of storms. Cassini recorded the birth of a monster, the Great Northern Storm of 2010, a planet-wide tempest that wrapped around Saturn's circumference. The images showed thunderheads towering higher than Mount Everest, lightning flashing 20 times more powerful than anything on Earth. From space, it looked like a white scar circling a world of gold. But perhaps the most mesmerizing sight of all was the North Pole. There, Cassini found a perfect geometric shape, a massive hexagon, each side longer than Earth's diameter, spinning endlessly in the upper atmosphere. Its edges were sharp, its rotation steady, its pattern stable over decades. Scientists had never seen anything like it, an atmospheric formation that seemed less like weather and more like design. Some described it as a natural resonance. Others saw it as the fingerprint of physics at cosmic scale. Whatever it was, it became one of Cassini's most haunting discoveries. From orbit, Saturn was hypnotic, almost unreal. The planet's vastness dwarfed the tiny spacecraft, yet every byte of data it sent home told a story billions of years old. The world Cassini found was ancient and alive, a world of order hidden in chaos, of light shining through ice, of storms so immense that they made Earth's history feel small. As it drifted through the void, Cassini was not merely observing. It was bearing witness to the universe's artistry, carved into the clouds and rings of a planet no human could ever touch. And as the spacecraft turned its cameras toward the darkness beyond, it found more wonders waiting in the cold, the strange, impossible moons that orbited Saturn like ghosts. Among Saturn's dozens of moons, Cassini found worlds that should not have existed. Each one was a paradox, a small celestial body rewriting everything we thought we knew about what a moon could be. The first of them was Titan, a world so large it could almost be a planet, wrapped in a thick orange haze that hid its surface from every telescope on Earth. Cassini's instruments pierced that veil, revealing something astonishing. Titan had weather, clouds, rain, rivers, and lakes, just like Earth, but made not of water, rather of liquid methane and ethane. The surface temperature was nearly 300 degrees below freezing, yet the chemistry was alive with complexity. Cassini watched as methane storms swept across its dunes, and seas of hydrocarbons reflected sunlight like glass. There were even seasons. Titan was a world sculpted by alien rain, a mirror of Earth frozen in time, whispering that life does not need warmth to find order. But it was not Titan that stunned the world. It was Enceladus. A small, icy moon, barely 500 kilometers wide, gleaming white against the black of space. At first glance, it seemed inert, a simple ball of ice. But as Cassini passed behind it, something unexpected appeared. A shimmering mist, rising from the moon's south pole, like breath in the cold. Cassini flew closer and discovered towering plumes of water vapor erupting from long fractures called tiger stripes. The spacecraft plunged straight through those jets, tasting the vapor with its instruments, and found water, salts, organics, molecules that form the basis of life. Beneath that cracked ice crust lay a global ocean, heated by tidal forces as Enceladus flexed under Saturn's gravity. In the frozen darkness of that ocean, energy and chemistry existed together, the two ingredients life always needs. The images Cassini sent home were haunting. Fountains of ice shooting hundreds of kilometers into space, illuminated by the distant sun like ghostly geysers. It was the most direct evidence yet that habitable environments might exist far from the warmth of any star. And there were more mysteries still. Iapetus, half dark, half bright, looked like something out of science fiction. One hemisphere black as coal, the other shining white, divided by a boundary so sharp it seemed drawn by hand. Around its equator ran a colossal ridge of mountains, 1,200 kilometers long and 20 kilometers high, as if the moon had once tried to pull itself apart. No one knew how it formed. Some speculated it was ancient debris from a vanished ring. Others thought it might be the remnant of a moon that froze mid-collapse. Cassini's cameras captured it all. The stark contrasts of light and shadow. The alien ridge curving against the void. It looked unnatural, and yet entirely real. A riddle written in ice and rock. Cassini's journey revealed that Saturn was not just a planet, it was an entire system, a miniature version of our own. Its moons had atmospheres, oceans, storms, and seasons. Some had chemistry that mimicked the early Earth. Others defied every model of formation we had. Every flyby brought another revelation. On Tethys and Dione, strange lines cut across the surface, like scars from ancient collisions. On Hyperion, Cassini found a tumbling sponge of ice, spinning chaotically in its orbit, its surface riddled with craters that looked more like honeycomb than stone. And deep within the planet's magnetic field, small moons left faint electromagnetic signatures, as if Saturn itself were aware of its children's presence. These were not just rocks circling a gas giant. They were worlds, each with its own story. And as Cassini moved among them, the mission began to feel less like observation and more like exploration. Every orbit peeled away another layer of mystery. Every image whispered the same unsettling truth, that even in the outer darkness of the solar system, nature finds ways to build complexity, beauty, and perhaps even the foundations of life. Cassini had come to study Saturn, but it had found something much larger, a reflection of how life itself might emerge anywhere, that energy, time, and curiosity are allowed to dance together. For all its beauty, Saturn still held secrets that science could not easily explain. Cassini's instruments, built with the precision of human logic, kept sending back data that hinted at patterns beyond our understanding, anomalies that challenged what we thought we knew about how planets behave. Nowhere were these mysteries more concentrated than in Saturn's rings, those delicate halos of ice and rock that have defined the planet's identity for centuries. What Cassini found there defied simplicity. At first glance, the rings looked serene, smooth, almost mathematical in their symmetry. But when Cassini flew close, so close that individual boulders could be seen tumbling through the light, it became clear that the rings were anything but calm. They were alive with motion. Waves rippled through them like the surface of a pond disturbed by invisible hands. Bright clumps formed and dissolved. Narrow gaps appeared and vanished again. Cassini's cameras recorded spokes, strange radial shadows drifting across the rings that seemed to rotate independently of the material around them. Scientists suspected they were caused by electrostatic charges, dust grains levitating above the ring plane, pulled by magnetic forces, but the pattern was too organized, too deliberate. Some frames even appeared to show vertical structures, casting shadows tens of kilometers long, as though objects were pushing up through the ring plane from below. Then came the propellers, tiny moonlets embedded within the rings, their gravity carving miniature wakes through the ice. They looked like cosmic fingerprints, each one the mark of a hidden body shaping its surroundings. Over time, Cassini tracked these features moving, growing, sometimes vanishing, as if the rings were incubating something. For a moment, scientists wondered if they were witnessing the frozen echo of planet formation itself, a miniature version of how worlds are born from disks of dust and gas. If so, then Saturn was not just an ancient planet. It was a living laboratory, showing creation in real time. Cassini's instruments measured the mass of the rings and discovered something astonishing. They were younger than Saturn itself, perhaps only a few 100 million years old. That meant they might have formed during the age of the dinosaurs on Earth, a cosmic event written in our own geological history. The idea was unsettling. The rings, so timeless in appearance, were temporary. They would eventually fade, ground down by collisions and solar radiation, the particles raining slowly into Saturn's atmosphere. The planet's most iconic feature was, in truth, ephemeral. The beauty we admired from afar was fleeting, like frost melting under sunlight. As Cassini ventured closer, the spacecraft began to detect something else: unexplained gravitational fluctuations, ripples in Saturn's field that hinted at layers deep within the planet, moving in resonance with the rings themselves. It was as though Saturn and its rings were locked in conversation, exchanging energy across hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Beneath the clouds, something vast and rhythmic pulsed, shaping the orbits above. Cassini's magnetometer picked up oscillations that no model could predict, signals that seemed to come from within the planet itself. And then there was the mysterious glow. During one orbit, Cassini's cameras captured faint bands of light scattering through the rings, changing subtly as the spacecraft passed through Saturn's shadow. Some images showed what appeared to be lightning-like flashes illuminating the ring particles from within, fleeting and ghostly. To most scientists, it was simply sunlight refracted by dust. To others, it was another puzzle in a growing collection of impossibilities. Every time Cassini brought clarity, it also deepened the mystery. By its 13th year in orbit, Cassini had revealed Saturn as a world of impossible precision, rings sculpted by hidden forces, storms shaped by geometry, moons that should not exist. And yet, each discovery pointed towards something greater, a planet not static, but alive in its own way, governed by rhythms we were only beginning to hear. The spacecraft had mapped every visible layer, every known orbit, and yet the feeling persisted that Saturn was still holding something back. So NASA made a decision, a daring one. Cassini would spend its final year performing a maneuver no spacecraft had ever attempted, diving repeatedly between the planet and its innermost ring, threading the narrow space where gravity and speed balanced on a knife's edge. They called it the grand finale. It would be the mission's final symphony, the most dangerous series of orbits ever flown. Cassini was about to enter a realm no human eye had ever seen, between the world and its rings, into the void that separates beauty from destruction. They called it the grand finale, but to the people who had spent decades guiding Cassini through the dark, it felt more like a farewell. After 13 years orbiting Saturn, the spacecraft had begun to run low on fuel. Without enough propellant to control its trajectory, it would eventually drift and risk colliding with one of Saturn's moons, potentially contaminating worlds like Enceladus or Titan, where the conditions for life might exist. That was unacceptable. So NASA made a poetic, almost human decision. Cassini would end its mission with purpose, diving into Saturn itself, sending back data until its signal was gone. It would die in the same world it had devoted its life to studying. The grand finale began in April 2017. Over the next 5 months, Cassini performed 22 daring plunges through the narrow gap between Saturn's atmosphere and the inner edge of its rings, a region only 2,000 kilometers wide. No spacecraft had ever entered that space. The gravitational pull was immense, the radiation intense, the debris unpredictable. One wrong angle and Cassini would be shredded in an instant. Yet each dive worked flawlessly. At nearly 124,000 kilometers per hour, Cassini threaded that gap again and again, skimming so close to the planet that its cameras could see individual storm cells, and its instruments could taste the composition of Saturn's upper atmosphere. For the first time, humanity was inside the very heart of the planet's domain. The images it sent back during those months were surreal. The rings, seen from below, shimmered like a vast, translucent curtain, their particles catching sunlight at impossible angles. The planet's clouds rolled beneath like an endless ocean of gold and amber. Lightning flickered within the storms, lighting up layers of atmosphere that no sunlight ever reached. The hexagon at the North Pole still turned, silent and eternal. Cassini passed through plumes of ring dust so fine they looked like smoke, and for a few moments its instruments registered the faint hiss of particles striking its body, Saturn's whisper brushing against human technology. On each orbit, Cassini measured the planet's gravity, magnetism, and density with unprecedented precision. Those readings revealed something no one expected. Saturn's interior was not uniform, but fuzzy, with a massive core that blurred into its outer layers instead of forming a distinct boundary. The planet was less a solid body and more a vast gradient of gas and liquid, its heart diffused across tens of thousands of kilometers. The rings, too, spoke of motion and decay, slowly raining material onto the planet, feeding it with icy dust like cosmic snowfall. Cassini had not just discovered Saturn's structure, it had witnessed its evolution. The final orbits became increasingly dangerous. Each pass brought Cassini closer, down into the gravity well, where the slightest miscalculation could end the mission early. Yet every dive worked perfectly. On the ground, engineers in California would sit in silence as the data streamed in, knowing that each transmission could be the last. Cassini had become more than a spacecraft. It was a companion, a voice that had spoken across space for 20 years. As the end approached, NASA planned one last dive, a plunge directly into Saturn's atmosphere. There, Cassini would collect data on temperature, pressure, and chemical composition while transmitting every bit of information it could until the surrounding gas stripped its antennas apart and melted its systems. No photograph could capture that descent. Only numbers, radio waves, and silence would tell the story. In those final months, something profound happened. Scientists who had spent half their lives on the mission began to speak of Cassini not as an object, but as a presence. They described it as brave, loyal, almost alive. Every image it sent felt like a final memory being shared before sleep. The spacecraft that had revealed Saturn's beauty was now preparing to join it, to fall into the same atmosphere it had admired for 13 years. Cassini's grand finale was not a failure of time or energy. It was the ultimate gesture of purpose, to go where no human and no machine had ever gone before. September 15th, 2017. The final morning of Cassini's life. Somewhere above Saturn's cloud tops, the spacecraft was already falling, drawn into the giant's gravity well like a leaf caught in a storm. It was traveling at more than 120,000 kilometers per hour, slicing through an invisible boundary that marked the end of its orbit and the beginning of descent. On Earth, at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, hundreds of scientists and engineers sat in silence, their eyes fixed on streams of telemetry data arriving from more than 1 billion kilometers away. They could not see the spacecraft. They could only hear its heartbeat in radio waves. Each signal was more than an hour old. By the time they received it, Cassini was already gone. As the spacecraft entered Saturn's upper atmosphere, the pressure began to rise. Tiny molecules of hydrogen and helium slammed against its body, heating its skin. Cassini's small thrusters fired automatically, struggling to keep the high-gain antenna pointed toward Earth. Its instruments continued to send data: temperature, composition, density, each reading an echo from a realm no human would ever visit. The numbers told a story of descent, a slow fall through layers of gas so dense that friction began to glow. The spacecraft's orientation wavered. The thrusters fired again, correcting, holding the link steady. The engineers back on Earth could see it in real time, the signal fluctuating, then stabilizing. Cassini was fighting to the end. Outside, Saturn's atmosphere was turning the sky into fire. The probe's golden body, built of titanium and aluminum, began to heat, its edges melting, its instruments failing one by one. The final image it captured was not of the planet below, but of the horizon, a faint gradient of light and shadow, gold fading into black. In those last seconds, the spacecraft was still transmitting. Its final message was not a picture, but data, one continuous stream of numbers, still whispering until the plasma around it grew too hot, too dense, and the radio signal broke apart. The carrier wave flickered on the monitors in California, then disappeared into noise. The room stayed quiet for a moment longer, and then applause. Not for the end, but for everything that had come before it. Cassini's ashes became part of Saturn's atmosphere, its molecules joining the clouds it had studied for over a decade. In that moment, the boundary between creation and creation blurred. a machine built by human hands, melting into the planet it had explored. It was a kind of cosmic symmetry, the observer becoming part of the observed. As the data stopped and the silence returned, Saturn continued to spin, indifferent but magnificent. The great rings glimmered in the sunlight. The hexagon turned on. Titan still rained methane. Enceladus still breathed vapor into the void. The world went on, exactly as before. Yet, back on Earth, something had changed. For the people who had followed Cassini's journey from its launch, its fall was not a death, but a transformation. It was proof that wonder can survive across lifetimes, that curiosity can reach across the solar system and still return home as meaning. Cassini had not simply shown us Saturn, it had shown us the courage of exploration itself. The mission ended not with silence, but with connection. The quiet knowledge that for one brief moment, humanity had reached into the darkness and touched another world. Long after Cassini's signal faded into static, the data it sent continued to speak. What it revealed was not just the anatomy of a planet, but a reflection of our own nature, our relentless urge to see, to know, to understand. Cassini had shown us oceans hidden beneath ice, storms that lasted for centuries, and a world where rain fell not as water, but as liquid methane. It revealed that the solar system was not a sterile machine, but a living network of chemistry, energy, and possibility. It proved that even in the coldest reaches of space, nature builds complexity, and that perhaps, somewhere beneath the frozen crust of Enceladus or the orange haze of Titan, life may already be stirring. Through Cassini, Saturn ceased to be a distant symbol of beauty and became something intimate, a real place with weather, gravity, tides, and texture. Its storms were no longer abstract patterns on a telescope image, but living systems captured in motion. The rings, once imagined as eternal, were revealed to be young and temporary, dissolving into the planet they encircled. Even the magnetic field of Saturn, once thought to be perfect, turned out to wobble slightly, hinting at hidden layers deep below the clouds. It was as if the planet had been waiting to reveal itself, one truth at a time, to the only species capable of asking. Cassini taught us that discovery is not about certainty, it is about surrender. Each time the spacecraft answered a question, it exposed 10 more. Its images did not just show a planet, they showed us the process of becoming. They showed us how chaos shapes order, how ice becomes light, how emptiness becomes meaning. The mission's legacy was not in its final dive, but in the way it redefined exploration itself. We learned that to explore is to risk loss, to embrace the unknown, to send something fragile into the void, knowing it will not return, and to do it anyway, because wonder demands it. The photographs Cassini left behind still defy comprehension. The blue shadows of the rings stretching across Saturn's face, the pale crescent of Enceladus venting ice into sunlight, Titan's orange horizon, faint and alien, glowing through its haze. Each image is both a scientific record and a work of art, a collaboration between machine, light, and time. And somewhere, in the background of one of those frames, there is Earth, a tiny blue spark caught between the rings, a reminder that everything we are, our history, our languages, our wars, our love, fits into a single pixel. Cassini saw us from nearly 1 billion miles away and sent the picture home. It was the universe holding up a mirror. What Cassini revealed was more than Saturn's truth. It revealed our own. That curiosity is sacred, that even in an indifferent cosmos, meaning can be created through the act of looking. That a world separated from us by space and time can still feel close when we understand it. Cassini's journey was not about finding life. It was about proving that life seeks to understand. Every signal, every orbit, every photon captured was a testament to that drive. And when its mission ended, Saturn became something else. No longer unreachable, no longer silent, but known. We once sent a machine to Saturn to learn about a distant world. What it found instead was us, the reflection of our need to explore, to endure, to reach for light even when the end is certain. Cassini's fall was not a tragedy. It was an offering. The proof that wonder, once born, does not die. It only transforms, carried forward in the minds of those who choose to keep asking. Now the story of Cassini drifts quietly into history, yet its echoes remain, etched into the data, the images, and the minds of those who watched a golden machine disappear into the clouds of another world. Saturn still turns, its rings gleaming like ancient script against the darkness, and somewhere within those endless orbits lies the path that Cassini carved. What began as a mission of machines became a story of meaning. It reminded us that exploration is not about conquest, but communion. That to study the universe is to fall in love with it. Cassini's journey was a love letter written in radio waves, a message from humanity to the cosmos saying, "We were here. We cared enough to look." When we stare at the images it sent back, we are not just seeing Saturn. We are seeing the reflection of our own imagination stretched across the void. The hexagon at the poles still spins. The storms still rage. The moons still whisper their secrets. And far beyond them, our small blue planet glows faintly through the dark, the only world known to hold the minds that built Cassini. That connection, the bridge between creation and creator, is what gives every mission meaning. Somewhere, light from the sun is still filtering through Saturn's rings, scattering in countless directions. Some of those photons are traveling now, crossing the solar system, heading home. In a few decades, perhaps, they will reach Earth's sky, faint, invisible, but real. And when they do, they will carry with them a fragment of the world Cassini revealed. Until the next signal, the next question, the next impossible dream that sends us into the dark again, keep looking up,